from the Caribbean. We don't know which island it is, but we are. This is what we love doing. We love meeting people. We love learning about their journey and just sharing to the world a way to just improve your mental fitness. So, Marcus, thank you so much for giving up your time, and we can't wait to learn more about your journey.
You say give it up like this, contributing my time in hopes that on the other end of this is something more beautiful, right? Like
Yes.
us combined is better than the separate parts. So thank you for sharing your platform, for hosting. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the magic to happen.
Me
Oh
too.
man, we've been looking forward to this conversation. We're so glad we're here. The energy, it's crazy because we're talking virtually and we're in different parts of the world, but the
Mm.
energy that we're creating together right now, it just feels so magical. So I'm so glad we're starting this conversation. I can't help but start with your name because when we saw your name, Marcus Aurelius, I turned to Chinazam. I said, Marcus Aurelius, is that really his name? And he said, yeah. You got to tell us, like, what is the story about that? What a powerful name.
You know, yes, all the words are well received. The powerful name. I can tell you the origin story for it, and then I can tell you how it has affected me. But my father he was listening to, I believe, Jim Rohn, but he was listening to some self-development tapes when I was in my mother's stomach in Riverside, California.
Mm.
And my father himself is Bahamian, just to tell you a little bit of backstory. My mother is Filipina, so I got the islands in my blood on both sides.
Amazing.
And I was born in California, and he loved what the speaker was saying. He's like, oh, that's a wise guy. And he went and he named me Marcus Aurelius. Um, there, so I've always been sincere growing up. And when I say sincere, I grew up as a Seventh-day Adventist, if you know what that is. Um, I would say my faith has never been a burden to me. And the reason I say it as such is because it, so I served as, I got caught up here and just trying to give you the origin story with my name. So I've satisfied the name part.
Yeah.
But then Marcus Aurelius wrote a book called Meditations, Thoughts with Himself for Himself. Grew up, saw the book, saw that his beliefs are actually matching mine.
Mm.
I served as a Bible English teacher in South Korea right after college. Went to college in Oakwood University in Huntsville, Alabama, studied communication and journalism. My worldviews changed, have no animosity towards the church, still have a connection with the divine. And I am a practicing Stoic, yeah. But then I loved communications, I loved teaching, continued on teaching, went to Saudi Arabia, taught out there for a while, learned about Islam as a world religion, taught in Spain and then Thailand,
Wow.
understood Buddhism and its philosophy, its approach to living, all these different approaches to living. And now I'm back in the Bahamas with my aging parents, caring for them while thinking, how can I contribute back to the world? I was a English language arts teacher. I love words. This is my book, Inspire Life Through Words of Well-Being.
Mm.
And that's the background of me. That's, yeah.
There's so much.
The most amazing introduction because you've just taken us all over the world for starters. And so I'm now just thinking, just the context that you're bringing is going to be so rich, so diverse, and you're going to infuse a lot of culture. Because I think I'm now starting to realize the importance of culture because it tells us about who we are and the relationship we need to have with ourselves. So that was what was jumping out for me. Yeah.
Yes, and looking at your past episodes, looking at life, I speak to human development and being in all those different places, working with people struggling through a language of expression.
Mm.
I'm trying to look for the meaning inside the person, inside their head, and so on. And what I work with is human development at a specific age, at a specific time, and I work with identity. And what culture is people like us do things like this. That's what Seth Godin says. That's collective identity.
Mm.
While also looking at individual identity, seeing when we break apart and when we come back together, because we're made stronger in the broken places. And that's my work. That's what I do. And I'm looking forward to this conversation. Looking at your past conversations, I'm like, yeah, I'm here to sit at your feet. So yeah.
You
All
are
right.
in the right place, and we are just so happy to take this lens. We were looking at the work that you put together, your book, and the work that you do for our audience, who are primarily, leaders in the business context, in their communities, in their families, for those who have families, right, who are really focused on how can I do my best consistently? How can I deliver? How can I have an impact? How can I, like build something, create something, put something out into the universe that is greater than me? That those are really the folks that are tuning in, and they're using their own understanding of themselves and their own management of their mental fitness as a cornerstone for how they show up in all the parts of their life. So that's just the lens. And we really want to dig into like your clients, like your form of intervention, right? Tell us a little bit more about that.
All right. Know thyself and you'll understand the secrets of gods and men. Like understanding yourself is really where it's at. And I work with parents of preteens, ages 10 to 14 years old, and I help them to show up. Now, I don't work with the kids per se. I've been in the classroom for so long. I've had those parent-teacher conversations. I keep my kids' book. This is the goodbye book they wrote for me. This is grade 5.
Okay.
Oh man. And Mr. Rogers said, if you want to help the kids, support the parents. It's filled with stick figures of men with afros. I love that. and my whole thing is stay in the game long enough that I can help them with their kids, right? Because this is a perennial topic, yeah. There are nuances for this day and age, but really quick run over of what it is, a run through. Kids are dependent as babies, 0 to 10. There's maternal energy that pulls them closer, says you are loved, you are cared for, you are supported, you are seen, you're soothed. Then there's paternal energy that pushes them away, that says you are loved, you are cared for, you are seen, you're soothed. I need you to be independent. And that's where that tension is. And that creates a holistic human, right? However, that's not the final form. The final form is interdependence, where it says, I promise to take care of me, to be in service to you, if you promise to take care of you, to be in service to me. And we are safe, we are seen, we are soothed, we are secure. It's that first breaking, though, that we're figuring out our roles, we're figuring out who we are and our identity, because all action comes from a space of identity. And when you're going through that the first time, that's why the teenage years can be tumultuous. They don't necessarily have to be. They will be, because all growth, everything that eventually grows must first break. And this is the first breaking. And if we walk with our kids in their mind, I love how it's a mental fitness conversation, because really what you're doing, as Angela Duckworth says, every kid needs one psychologically wise adult in their life. And that's just a person to walk with you in your mind through what's happening. And really, that's what therapists are. That's what storytellers are. That's what mentors are. If we have a community of this, that's why we need a community. That's how we heal the world. Oh my goodness, sound like Michael Jackson. Hold on. But yeah, I heard it coming out of my lips. I was like, what? Heal the world? But yeah, that's.
But we are with you. Like,
I love what you just said, because so we're coaches, and we're trying to bring this mental fitness revolution, and it just hit us that exactly what you just said. We need more trusted advisors or people like that who could walk with everyone. We didn't say it as beautifully as heal the world, but our vision is if everybody took care of their mental fitness and did exactly what you said. Oh my God, like how beautiful would the world be?
Yeah. Well, and this is a principle from Islam, the inner war and the outer war. But it's take care of the greater jihad that is here, or the inner struggle, the conflict. And that mirrors, if you are the universe experiencing itself, that mirrors, you can then serve the outer conflict as it's happening. You're right. So let's start with client 0, client 1, us.
Yeah.
And then I work with the parent, and then we see that ripple effect. Yeah.
I love Sorry, Vivi, you go first.
No, please go ahead. I'll jump in after you.
I love this conversation because we have two beautiful kids and
Yes.
boy and a girl.
Mm-hmm.
Until you said that thing about paternal and maternal energy, it didn't even dawn on me because I treat my son different to my daughter. I didn't know why, but I did. And I think this is a great conversation to start having because they mean the world to us and everything that we
Sure.
do is in service of them. And this mental fitness thing that we're doing, I didn't realize this is part of our family philosophy. And I really want to understand. We know we have to get the relationship with ourselves first, because I think that's one thing me and EJ do is like you've got to work on yourself. You've got to give yourself what you need. Show yourself self-love. If you don't show yourself self-love, then you can't show it to your kids. And I can't wait to learn from you about, because identity is the most important thing, and we want to make sure that we build strong identity in our children. So can't wait to learn from you.
I'm, I'm at the bit later on. Ask me about the show up framework because that's where it starts. S is start with a strong identity.
Yeah.
But yeah. EJ, I want to invite you into it. You look like you're about to say something. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like this conversation, like as Shinazam said, is so relevant for us because even when I think about like for ourselves, like a core part of how we think of what good looks like has our children right at the center, right? And then I think about our audience, our listeners, like the members of the Real Talk community, many of whom either have children of different ages, whether they're young children or they're in their teens or they're adults, and some of whom, even if they don't have children, have other young adults in their immediate environment, right, in their personal network, in their communities that they care deeply about. But it's interesting because I just wonder how much space we get given to talk about things like this. It's like in most of the resources, let's say that our audience is probably going to, it's maybe helping them think about first and foremost, how do I deliver in my work or business? Then what do I do about myself and my own caring for myself? But this role that many of us play in the lives of other young adults, that's what I find fascinating about the fact that you start with the adult that has a vested interest in the young adult, because I don't know how much support we get given in service of that mission for those of us that care deeply about that. So this conversation is especially meaningful for us and for our audience. So I just wanted to contribute that.
Well, watch this. Just to piggyback on that, a corporation comes from corpus, which means body. A body is made up of different parts, right? This is just organizational and human development. The second thing I want you to think about is you align with people's interests. What are you more interested in than your progeny or than your offspring? That's what you care about. So I'm aligning with your meaning. I'm aligning with it because I know. Well, another thing that it speaks to my work is my father and our relationship growing up. It wasn't no crystal stairs, but those burdens, those stresses, actually, if you can find gratitude in this present moment, everything of the past has brought you here. So all of it was supposed to be. Rarely do I use that word supposed to. It is what it is, right? But just the point being, you have a corporate culture. You have a culture at your business. People like us do things like this. You have a family culture. People like us do things like this. And again, culture is just collective identity. So let's break it down to the individual and let's respect that and let's cultivate that intentionally. And that can lead into the next part of the conversation where social media is and our formation of culture and strong identities. So yeah, where do you want to go?
I don't think we have enough time for this conversation. I'm going to call that out. I think this probably needs to be a multi-part series, but let's start off where we can. Start from the beginning for you, right? Like what pushed you, invited you to get into this work in the first place?
The work of communication, the work of preteens, or the work of parents?
The work of, coaching parents in supporting their, the young adults in their lives.
Yeah. The quick cheeky answer that came to mind was, I'm sharing with parents all the things that I wanted to tell my dad.
Yeah.
You know what it
I
two
like
resources two resources worth directing the audience to is 14 Conversations Before 14. Her name is Michelle. It's I something, right? It talks about how to have these conversations. A second one is The Breakthrough Years by Ellen Galansky. It just came out this year. She did 9 years research, and she's an advocate for kids. And it starts off by saying what kids are saying, this is how we're feeling, and this is what we want to express during these teenage years. Because for me, in my understanding, teenage years it's a time of exploration, of understanding, of risk taking, and we need to direct them in healthy risk taking. Yeah. Um, so if they find time to read those books, yeah, but I try to operationalize it and make it actionable in the work that I do. What else informs it is because I look back at my past and I'm grateful for young Marcus. He was a wholesome dude. Felt corny in the moment. It felt, I mean, let's be honest, right? I honestly do care and love for people. And then I also know how to set up my boundaries now as time went on, and knew how, okay, if I want to show up and serve the world, how to direct it and focus it. It's just, I'm proud of what he did. And I want to honor what he did by having the mission now. And this is the thing. This is the dope thing about past Marcus. He used to talk to future Marcus, be like, yo, give me some insight. And that's crazy because now sometimes I step into that moment and I'm like, thank you. And he's telling me, thank you. And it's just a cycle of gratitude. I think I'm putting it into words, but I'm doing this work for the past me, yeah, and for the future me. And if you are me experiencing life from a different perspective, like I honor your story, and maybe my approach to living could help you. That's what I'm doing. It's really self-serving, but you are a part of me, so I'm serving you.
amazing. I wanted to jump in quickly because I had someone who I was coaching, and they shared with me that when they visualize or meditate, that they're speaking to their future self, so in 10 or 20 years, and then their child self as well. And all three are constantly communicating with each other. So it's really powerful what you said in that being able to like go to your future self and ask, what should I do now? And the future self giving you advice. So that when you get there, you're like, oh yeah, I remember when I asked that, and I did do that. So that's a really powerful thing. But I loved also what you said about how your work came about the conversations you wanted to have with your dad.
Yeah.
And this is something for me that's become quite powerful this year. My dad passed away last year and got to bury him this year, but it kind of made me realize how much that relationship shaped who I am now with my son. And it was so strange because I went back and I remember thinking I wanted to bring something back with me that could just kind of remind me of my dad. And the weirdest thing was he had this picture of me as a 2-year-old or something in his room. That was the first thing I took away. And it's obviously going back to that point is like looking at that picture, there were so many things I wanted to tell him and couldn't really tell him and probably didn't tell him. And now it's coming out. And now I only notice it now, it's coming out in the way I react with my son. But I'm still grateful for everything that my dad did, because I think before I was like, I want to be this good person. I don't want to make those mistakes. But now I'm realizing there were never mistakes. Like everything he did is what made me who I am now. And everything he did, he was supposed to do. So it's very freeing now. And that when I'm interacting with my son, I'm kind of realizing I can't really mess it up as long as I come from a place of love. And it's actually informing everything that I'm going to do is going to inform the conversation that I hope that he gets to have with me. But that's one thing I do want. I want to make sure that I have that. I think because the culture I grew up in Nigeria, I was not able to have those conversations. And that's a big part now is that I want to make sure, culture or not, I want to be able to have those. I want my son to have those conversations with me. So, and I want to be listening and make sure I hear what he's trying to say.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for honoring your dad, and thank you for honoring your dad in the way you're living and showing up for your kid. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh man, I can tell you this. Well, there's just semantics, but you will mess up.
I know.
and I just want to follow that up quickly with I feel that's a feature, not a flaw of humanity. We're stress progressive, and the beautiful thing is, Ernest Hemingway said, life breaks us all, and then we're made stronger in the broken places. The thing is, do we break from the inside or do we break from the outside? All right. Just like an egg, right? If you break from the outside, there's death. But if you break from the inside, life emerges. The etymology for parent and for teach means to bring forth. And in the work of what I do is, as a teacher, we say we create the context for learning to take place, and it's trusting the beauty on the inside to bring it forth. Right. We also read Things Fall Apart. And if you understanding the culture, you're trying to break it from the outside in.
Yeah.
But it's this, how do you honor the elders while having a new parental approach to have it emerge? Go on, sorry.
Wow.
Now, I don't know whether IJ wants to say anything, but I just love that you said that, because growing up, we watched Things Fall Apart, must have watched it 30 times, if not more. And it was so strange because going back, and I remember going back to the village, so much that my dad poured into me all of a sudden started to click into play. And it was very crazy. As he was clicking into play, I was like, oh my God, okay, that's what he meant. That's why he did that. And now it's like, it feels like he's still living on in me, because now more things are coming into play. But I do have that thing where, okay, now I now have more respect for the honoring the elders and the culture, but I still also realize that there is a different vantage point. And I think that's my struggle, is how do I manage the two going forward?
I remember in a moment, my dad used to cut down conversations when I was a teen, right? When I say cut down conversations, he used to stop them because he would get frustrated. That was my father's, if you will, flaw, Achilles heel. Never directed his anger at me, never anything physical, but yelling and so on, right? And a go-to line he would say is, "You'll understand when you get older." And I used to hate that, right? Because he's playing, he's telling me I'm young, like you don't understand, you don't get it. And I remember as an adult calling him, and I was like, I get it. And he's like, what do you get? And I said, you know what? I don't remember the specific conversation, but I remember you saying that, me being angry. And just because you used to come up more than once. And then I said, no, I get it. I understand. And it was just the minutia of life, the heaviness of it, what I was going through in the moment. And it's just like, he didn't know how to set boundaries. He didn't know how to communicate. He didn't have the communication to actually say, I need this space, or we're going to come back to it later, or other frameworks that I set up. But wisdom of my life experience looked back and said, yeah, I get it, Dad. No, I get it. I get it. And that's what it is, right? Communication is to understand. When you can look at the other and say, I understand. I may not be in agreement. I understand. I get it. I see you. You see me.
I love that. Communication is to understand. I may not be in agreement, but I understand. That is so critical for every relationship that you're a part of, really. I want to hear more about your frameworks. I'm sure you have some that are like more like pivotal for you than others in your work and in your life journey. What would you say is the number one framework that you go to, by and large?
I mean, my program is based around the show up framework. The show up framework, right? And I'll set the context by starting with the challenge of preteens. It's wall of ice. I call it the wall of ice, ICE. When you're entering into a new role from a child into an adolescent, just I want to make this real quick point. One of the peeves of adolescents is that they're described as being immature. They're not immature. They're adolescents. Because you don't call a baby an immature toddler. You don't call a toddler an immature child.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
That's a really good. Ooh, that was a takeaway.
Do you call a child an immature adolescent? No. Like, they're at a stage where they're in that transition.
And you know, one thing, sorry, just to add to this,
Yeah,
something
talk to me. Yeah.
like, I didn't even realize that their brain is not fully developed. Like, there's a bit of reasoning. When I heard that, I was like, oh my God. So there's a bit where you can't even communicate with them because they haven't, that reasoning bit has not developed yet. So that just makes it even harder.
So adolescents, teens, they do not communicate fairly. They do not, right? Their brain is actually going through a purging or a weaning away of stuff that they're not going to use. When they're a kid, it's like spaghetti against the wall. We're just throwing, they're absorbing, taking everything in. But then now when they're hitting this phase of who am I, and they have to form their identity, that's where we step in to be intentional in forming that, right? It's also worth noting, think about it. Their world has been black and white for everything you've taught them up until then. You've been their primary source of influence. There's no persuasion without identification. They strongly identify with you, right? Then they start to see, oh, I'm human, and there are other people who have differing points of views, uncles, aunties. This is why people are developing quicker in the sense of mentally. Social media. On the other side of the screen, they're seeing other viewpoints. That's why we need to guard the gates there. All right. And that's a whole nother conversation, as you're saying, EJ. But when they see these different viewpoints, what creeps in is mistrust. They haven't, this skepticism, right? Nuance taps in about 18 years old, when you can see different viewpoints of grays, shades of gray. But black and white is, I don't know if I can trust you. Which is why they look for other viewpoints, which is why they go searching. Your role as a present, trustworthy parent is to establish a foundation of trust. To say, hey, you're going to try these things. I'm going to encourage you to healthy risk taking, because you're going to risk things. But you need to understand what are revolving doors or what are one-way doors, as Jeff Bezos calls them. I need you to take risk where you can come back. And, there's this foundation of trust here. I'm touching on a lot of things, but just jump in when you're ready, right? But trust is based on three things. And this comes from a professor at Stanford. She used to work with Uber. I forget her name right now. She has a TED Talk. You could look it up. But trust is, one, you start with the truth. You're telling the truth. You know what? As you see it. Because I think parents, if you're really showing up, you're telling them your truth, right? Your dad was telling you his truth, right? 100%. After that, telling the truth is a second, it makes sense. It follows logic. Now, kids can't follow that logic sometimes, but you're trying to make it make sense in their head. And the way you make it make sense in their head is actually active listening, first listening to them. And the third thing, it has to know that it's caring. You're actually taking action for their well-being. If you know a person is telling the truth, if a person, it makes sense, and they're taking action for your well-being, you trust them. And then trust is built over time. It's, can you do that when they're still being dysregulated, doing all this other stuff, being pulled to and fro? That's why I work with the parents to put your mask on first, make sure you're stable. I am a life coach, yeah, but I work on your communication with your preteen. And now we haven't talked about the preteen yet, but I mean, I can give insight into what your preteen's going through. But that's the foundation of my work.
Wow. So yeah, maybe give us the other side of the coin. Like, what is the preteen going through in that period?
Sure, yeah.
It's teen 14 to 18 years old. What's teen again?
Yeah. Well, developmental ages shift, Different people are different people. Preteens are usually 10 to 13. Okay. Teen is in the word, but I mean, it's at the beginning of adolescence. Adolescence usually goes from 10 to early 20s, right? And it's a year, their years signified by, there's biological change in their body and so on, but then also societal role changes of, you are expected to take on more responsibilities. You are expected to, well, let's just talk about it. The I is identity breaking. Who are you? And that's really what life is asking you continually through life. Who are you? Who are you? But it's just at this first stage, this is the first time life is really asking, who are you? If to fast forward through life, we often say, I'm not a child. And then we associate with a group. After a while, we say, I'm not this group. And life is like, I'm not asking you who you're not. I'm asking you, who are you? And that's why you make the statement, I am. And you fill in the blank. So identity breaking. The second is collaborative mistrust. Hey, balloons. Collaborative mistrust. You don't know who to work with or who has your what. And that's why teens oftentimes they you know when you're riding a roller coaster and they put on the safety rail, you shake it.
To
That's
make
why
sure
they're
that's
testing.
working. Yeah.
To make sure that it's safe.
Yes.
To make sure that it can keep you. That's what teenagers are doing with the adults in their life. Like, are you gonna shake out of my life, or are you gonna be here? Sometimes, not all the time, but yeah, oftentimes it's just like I'm testing you to be like, are you one of these crazy ones, or are you one of these? Are
you gonna last the course?
Are you? The word is integrity, but are you integrated? Are you regulated? Yeah. Collaborative mistrust. And in the show up framework, we answer all these challenges. And the third thing is emotional management. Emotional management. Emotions, they have 5 things, but some of the bigger things of the purpose of emotions are they move us, they tell us subjectively how we are moving towards our desires. They let us know our well-being. And if they're in tune, we also can read the well-being of others and how they're moving towards their goals. So that's why emotional vocabulary it's important. It's telling us how we're moving. They motivate us to what we do. So those are the challenges, the ice wall, I called it. And that's where they start to distance because they're trying to figure this stuff out. Now, how do you melt it as an adult? You show up. You show up.
So that's an example of what the problem is. It's like the in that stage of their development, they put up this wall of ice, and you can see some of the symptoms of that. And you're trying to melt that ice so that you can support them at that time when they need it the most. Is that a fair way of putting that? As a parent, I mean, is that the parent?
Yeah. I hear, and this is just semantics. It's not a problem. It's that's the challenge of the time, and that is what we're gonna help them answer.
It's not a problem, and they're not immature.
They are not a child.
There's a life stage where they're just the first challenge of being forming the identity. Who are they? So it's not a problem.
You know, this is the problem solver in me, the consultant in me. Like I'm always looking like, how do we define this? Like, let's make sure we know
what are we solving for here. What are we trying? What's wrong?
Charles Duhigg, he just has this book called Super Communicators, and he was talking about like when we come to conversations, it's 3 things, right? Oftentimes they're problem solvers of just like, look, this is just information. We're just solving this. And there are other people who just want an emotional connection. And then the third one, it's just like, daily, how does he call it? Social connection of lubricating like our social interactions of how's the weather. Some people don't like that small chat of how's the weather. Yeah. But when you know the purpose of the conversation, it's just like, yeah, you can be in alignment with your audience, because that's the thing about communication. All it really is finding alignment, and the way you do that is, as a mature person, as the adult in the room, understanding where the other person is coming from, and being firm in knowing who you are, so that wherever they're coming from, they can come wherever they want to come from, but you know who you are. You were about to say something.
No, I was gonna ask. Like, no, thank you for clarifying that. I'm going back to that part in the journey where the parent is like, okay, I'm aware of certain things. I'm aware of a detaching or stepping back that's happening with this either preteen or young adolescent in my life. how do they articulate the problem to you when they come to you for support?
The parent? Or,
the
yeah.
parent. Like, what are some of the language, the words that they use to seek help from you?
Yeah, my preteens pulling away. They're locking themselves in their room, or they're giving me one-word answers, or it always ends up in a fight. It doesn't, and it doesn't have to explode to something like that, but rather I'm noticing a shift in my kid. What's wrong?
Mm.
And it's like, dude, life happens and we give it meaning, but what life is, it's just change. It's continual change. And then when the meaning you give it is, for me, there's something different, not necessarily wrong. And it could be, it's wrong if it's not in alignment with your expectations. That's what wrong is, right? And I'm just like, yeah, it's not meeting your expectations. Let's be curious and explore this together. What could this mean, and what are the possibilities? And then what actions are you going to take to work towards your expectation? You're worthy of your expectation, but you're going to be collaborating with other people, which is your team, which they're new to the game. They're new to the game.
Mm.
Yeah.
I like what you just said there. You're worthy of your expectation. Because I can't remember the book now. I think it's called The Psychology of Money. And like the guy was saying where your expectations is what causes a lot of your heartache. So I was always like, well, get rid of your expectations. That's what I love what you just said. Is like you should have an expectation of a kind of relationship you want with your kids and how that interaction is gonna go. So I'm gonna keep hold of that.
Let me double down on that. You're worthy of your expectations because if you're here for well-being, life supports those who support life. That's why I work with parents, because I know if your heart is in your kids, like you're all about supporting your kid and you want to do that as best as you can. And life supports those who support life. That's why I can't get mad at my dad after all these years. It's just when I know that the shelter I had, the food I had, for all the faults and fails, it's just like he did the best he could, and he's asking me to do him one better. That's a dope feeling.
That is a dope feeling.
That is, you're building on what came before you, right? Progressively, just enhancing. Wow.
But I always
Spiraling up.
feel like to be at peace as a human being, you need to be at peace with your parents. And I think that's when you realize that your parents were just human beings. Like literally, they were just doing the best they could with all the stuff that life was getting thrown at them. And the moment I came to realize that, I got to see a picture of my dad in his 20s, which I'd never seen. I always thought my dad just came fully formed as this 40-year-old guy. And when I saw the picture, I was like, oh my God, like this guy didn't have a clue what he was doing.
Oh man, my brother, he finished graduation. His wife had to drop out of college because they had a kid, and he said there's never a wrong time. There's never a right time to have a kid, but there is a wrong time. He did it the wrong time. And in the conversation, I told him, I said, dude, when you were my age, you already had 2 kids, you were holding down a job, and you were having to make these payments here and there. I said, I don't know how I could have done it. And he said, Marcus, when you have a kid, you figure out how to do it. Like you don't say, I don't know how. It's just like, no, this is how I'm gonna do it. Yeah. And,
Wow. Do you know what? I want to dig into this more, right? So now the parent has come to you. They've shared the shift that they've noticed in their, I don't want to call them a child, in their young adult.
adolescent. Yeah.
Adolescent. Yeah, in their
Why
adolescent.
did you say problem there? You said no. You've shifted your language. No problem.
Rome wasn't built in a day, as Marcus Aurelius knows. You know, it takes time. But so they've noticed a shift, right? What's the first step that you take with them, with the parent?
Yeah. Start with a strong identity. So this is the show up framework. You start with a strong identity. All actions come from identity, right? And that's James Clear, Atomic Habits. That's life. We all know that. In the show up framework, we start with virtues and values. And have you ever heard of VIA, Virtues in Action?
Mm.
No.
So it's from positive psychology, which is the studied art of of how people develop. Yeah. So it's a science. It's not just just positive psychology. The VIA is character traits that are found in all humans, all cultures, all religions, all ancient knowledge, and all present day science. There are 24 of them. There are 5 that are expressed. Of the 24, you express 5 uniquely as your top traits. Not necessarily strengths, because others aren't weaknesses. It's just express more.
Mm.
Some examples of these are creativity, leadership, perseverance, curiosity. All right, I have my 5 on my desktop, and it's just whenever I'm facing a challenge, what are my traits that are uniquely me that I show up with, right? And here's a beautiful thing. It's called virtue spotting. When I'm out and about and I'm meeting people, I'm thinking, what virtues are they expressing? And I'm speaking to that. So I see humor here. So yeah, I feel the levity in a sense, but then I also feel the gravitas of leadership. You have a podcast, you know what I mean? Collaboration. You guys are doing it together. That's beautiful. So like when you virtue spot, where your attention goes, your energy flows. So it's just like people are saying, oh yeah, I'm showing up like this. And if you ever question what is a virtue, you could have too much of it, or you could have a deficiency of it. It's meeting it in the middle. If you ever wonder what it is, it's the trait that is working towards well-being, the character trait that is working towards well-being. And these traits, they actually bind us as humans. They're what builds us together and creates our boundaries. Those are virtues. Next is values. Values simply just means what's important to you. It might be money, and that's cool. It might be the sense of having fun and joy or making music. Like that's your value. It might be having close family ties. Like that's you. Like do you, boo. But when you take your virtues and your values, that's uniquely you. So we're starting somewhere on an empowering note. Yeah.
Mm.
And this and let me just say this right at the end. A lot of things, when you know who you are, you're not easily swayed by a lot of other things because it's just that's not who I am. Oh, okay. Oh, you want me to go do this and that? Oh no, that's cool. That's not me. As teenagers, we might try to experiment as we're trying to figure out what our identity is. But when we grow into wisdom and you want to instill this at a young age, it's just like, no, that's not us. And when you hear me say that's not us, collective identity is culture. There's a family culture. You establish a family culture. Mom and dad are this. You guys are this. And then we are like this.
I love that.
Love that.
What's coming up for you, Chinazam?
No, I'd never thought of virtues. I don't know why, but I love the way you explained it as like whatever brings you well-being. And that's what we're always talking about, mental fitness. And now it makes sense that if you combine values and virtues, then that's the most important thing. That should be the driving force. And then that's what anchors you so that when life throws all this and everybody tells you that, if you're combining the two, then it's very hard for you to be swayed. Yeah.
If I could piggyback on this, and this will resonate with you, as I don't oftentimes have this conversation when we're studying Chinua Achebe and the female author, what's her name?
Chimamanda Adichie.
Yeah, Amanda.
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the big criticisms of Western literary critics is they don't see the culture for its virtues and its values. When we go back to the continent, we're seen as savages. It's like, no. Virtues are there. They have values. Maybe they're not yours, but they are human people having a human experience.
Yeah.
And that's what I see in my work. When I meet anybody, you have virtues and values, and I'm speaking to that. I'm meeting you as a human. Yeah.
And so I wanted to just jump in. That's what
You're good.
that's just really hit me when I had to go back to bury my dad. Was as a young growing up, I was always like the culture, and it seemed stupid, and especially looking at it through a Western lens. A lot of things seemed stupid, but then when I went back and I started to realize our culture kind of grew from the virtues that we had and the values that not just my dad but his dad, and then then it was just hit me like, oh my God, so much like knowledge that I had not really been paying attention to. And now I realize that I can't move forward unless I start connecting back to that, because whether I like it or not, that's poured in me by my dad. And I have to understand it if I'm trying to go forward.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you know what? Just to add to that, it's funny because when we look at some of the things that are in existence in our culture, where we're from, that were borrowed from other cultures, some of it doesn't work.
Mm.
Surprise,
Hey.
surprise, it's not working.
Yeah.
It wasn't meant for that group of people, for that environment, for that weather terrain, for that, fill in the blanks. And and that's that whole thing about when we try to evaluate something to say, is this good or is it not? It's really understanding that, you have to create the culture needs to stem from, it's like a grounds up process. You can't superimpose it because it doesn't work.
Mm,
Mm.
And even as
mm,
we've been kind of building out, like Chinazon's been a coach for many years. He's got like over almost 3,000 hours of coaching with clients. And I'm new to the game. I just started, a year ago. And, a big part of my process has been, how do I blend all the different parts of my individual culture to show up as a coach? And that's been a huge lens for me that I've been using, of like, okay, I've lived in different countries. I've got my traditional culture. I've got, my own unique quirks. And how does all of that come in and integrate to create my culture as an individual, as a coach, and how I show up and my presence and my energy? So I really, and then how does that, when we started collaborating, a huge one for us was, what are we now co-creating? Because we already have a family, but now we're collaborating as coaches. That's a different,
mm.
that contributes something different to our culture as a team, as a couple. So it's I love that you're making ties to, the individuals, in terms of the two parents, for example, and then how that kind of creates this like rippling effect.
Mm.
And creating room also for them to differentiate between themselves and their young adolescent, so that
Mm.
there's room for those individuals to create their own culture, and then looking at together, what are we as a collective? Like that's really powerful.
That's how a community grows. That's how actually our brain literally goes. It diverges and then it converges. And the idea is it makes this is from Dan Siegel. He says it makes fruit salad. And what
Mm.
fruit salad is, it's not blended. It's not like a smoothie, but rather it's a clear mango, a clear cantaloupe, a clear whatever you want to put in your fruit salad. But it's a medley of fruits that are whole
So,
in themselves and separate in themselves. Yeah, yeah. And they're whole, separate and whole, and
mm.
collectively whole.
I love that image of a fruit salad, and
And
I see you writing down. I see you.
that is powerful.
EJ, as you were just talking, it just actually reminded me of, we had a conversation yesterday with another couple, and they kind of made me realize where now that both of us we've left corporate, we're now almost out of the system. And it just reminded me of, we get this thing superimposed on us by the Western culture, and we go to school and everything else, but that's not us. And we have to keep forcefully questioning who we are, where did we come from? Because the couple said, the way he put it is like, if he's trying to do something and everybody else is telling him, you should do it like this, you should do it like this, he's automatically like, well, no, I'm going to do it this way. Because however you're looking at it, you're definitely not looking at it from my lens or where I come from, because you don't even know where I come from. And as I'm now thinking about this with the way we're trying to bring up our kids, is to obviously, because when I started as a coach, that was one thing I went through my corporate life where go and study this exam, go and learn this, and literally it's brainwashing you to, this is what you're supposed to do. And when I started being a coach, I was like, no, this is my energy. So somebody else, you can't come and tell me what my energy should be like. So I did the initial certification to be like, I don't want you to think I'm a quack, but I deliberately was like, I'm going to learn from how I interact with other people's energy and make sure that I'm not doing any damage.
Yeah.
Because I knew that the people I'm going to coach or the way I'm going to coach, nobody who's created some other system can tell me about that, because I have to learn that myself. And just listening to you say this is like, as well with our kids, we're going to have to learn who this individual is and how to bring them into the forefront.
Two things, if I could put on that. When I look at human development and when I look at coaching or any system or whatever, there are principles of human growth. Yeah. And I always used to tell my students, my 9th graders and 12th graders, look, these are the principles, but I'm waiting on the remix. Like, you're going to do it differently.
Sure.
But yeah, and this is how I'm doing it. This is how I'm doing it based on these principles. You're going to do it different. I'm waiting. And that's a line I would always say. I'm waiting on a remix. Give us something to vibe to. The second thing worth mentioning is when you collaborate, when you're with other people and they are who they are and you are who you are, it will rub people the wrong way. Rumi said, this is a paraphrase, but if we avoid everything that rubs us the wrong way, however will we shine? How are we going to be polished? And when you face that stuff that tells you to be something else in a world that's constantly trying to tell you you should be this way, to be who you are is one of the greatest privileges. It is going to create conversations in you that are going to conflict. And that's why you have to resolve what's in here. And then you come out and you say, yeah, no, this is who I am. And that's where you set up your boundaries and you go through all those other aspects. But it will rub you the wrong way. And your preteen is going to rub you the wrong way too.
Yeah, I'm not looking forward to that bit.
As you said that, just as you were describing that, you said Rumi, which is amazing because that's one of his like number one influencers. Yeah, got it on the wall behind him. One of the guiding influences of his life. But as you said that, I couldn't help but think to myself, like, I would love to hear you kind of model for us what a conversation could look like with a preteen about identity. Like, is that something? I know we didn't tell you in advance, but just
that's all right.
Off the cuff, just like, what could that look like?
So the easiest conversation is the conversation inside a person's head, right? So if we go to VIA, Virtues in Action, there's a survey there that you can take for adults and for youth. And that's what I used to do when I served as a mentor. That's what I would do with all my clients. That's when I did work with preteens. And when they say, okay, yeah, these are expressed inside you, just like with any coaching, it's the easiest conversation is, what are you thinking about? So I wouldn't say, what are you thinking about, but rather, what's forefront on your mind? So I don't assume they have a problem because, I mean, it might be another project they're working on, something they're thinking about, but you start wherever their mind is first, right? The next creator question you ask is, what do you want? Now, mind you, I wouldn't ask it as directly as this. I'm feeling the vibe and maybe there are phrases, but it's, hey, where are you right now? What do you want? The third question, always pepper it with, and what else? It's just helping them stretch. Now, being age appropriate, sometimes, I mean, they've not thought about this stuff. I remember my students told me one time, said, I loved your class, but it was just so much thinking. So, so I'm trying to scaffold and meet them where they are, right? I'm a pretty heady dude. Like, I could go deep and I have to catch myself of just like, meet them where they're at. Meet them where they're at. Yeah. And that's why it's done over time. And that's why not just principles with me, but in the community, if you have other people, these are like mini interventions. Each time you're getting tuned up here, with auntie, with cousin, if you're in a community like that. The next question is, what's stopping you from getting there? And again, I'm not giving them the answers yet. I'm wanting them to fill in the blanks before I tell them, and this is all part of the show up framework, but it's open up communication. Before I tell them how I did it, or I give them a story that they could relate to, and I invite them back into the conversation. When you look at what's challenging you or what's stopping you, you want them to own their actions. So what is it within inside you? What is it within your control? And that's also where you open up conversations of, there's no deficiency. There's nothing wrong with you if you're not meeting expectations. I'm doing this meta because I'm talking about the conversation, but I'm also giving you my thinking about it. If a person's not meeting your expectations, it's one of two things and a third. But one is they don't feel supported, or they just don't have the skills. The third is they just don't care. It's not important to them. And if it's not important to them, that just means, yeah, well, it's not important at the moment. We can revisit it at another time. I said a lot there, but I mean that's how a conversation is going on in my head, and all the time I'm doing this, there's no judgment. I'm not attacking them because that's why kids clam up. It's I'm not an adult. I'm supposed to be an adult. Suppose I don't like that word, or I should be an adult. Adults are perfect, and I know I'm not perfect, so I feel attacked. Oftentimes they're thinking, "What's wrong with me?" It's like, "Baby boo, ain't nothing wrong with you. Like you're growing up. Life is life." And you know what? I know life is life because I've lived life. Tell me about it. Like, talk to me. Tell me what's going on. And that's just sitting with the person as in wisdom.
Yeah.
What's happening for you, Chinism, as you heard that?
No, it was beautiful the way you did it. Just what's on their mind, what anything else, and just the way you went through the questions. It was such a brilliant way of getting into the person's head and actually going into their world and seeing what it is without any attachments, without judgment, without anything. So that was
As you were sharing that, I love the non-attachment, the non-judgment, the openness, the warmth, the caringness of it. I couldn't help but think that those are the same questions I ask my clients.
yeah.
You know what I
Yes.
mean? In that order. And so it made me kind of realize that I think I might be underestimating the capacity to have those kinds of conversations for that age group. You know, I don't know what I was expecting. I thought maybe in my mind I was thinking you're going to say something super elementary, but like that's the same level at which I'm engaging with adults. So I don't know. That was an interesting experience.
Well, let me tell you the two hangups that happen inside the parent-child context is, yeah, emotions are high. You're stressed. Like they're needy. It's not that they have needs, but to be needy means they don't think they can meet their needs. You're transitioning from a child into an adolescent. And it's, hey, you can meet your needs. I'll support you in that, but I can't meet all your needs. And that's where the breaking comes for them, right? Another thing that comes is it's I get it. You're in the moment. Like it's a constant. It's easy to say in a conversation like this, and it's easy for me to say after I've gone over so many reps like this. But if you're a first-time parent, or if you're a parent who, when society expects teenagers to be rudely and wild and all that, like to be well-adjusted to profoundly sick society is no measure of health at all. But when the society is just like, oh yeah, teenagers are going to be rude, that's kind of setting the tone. And it's just like, no. I remember I used to walk into class. It's just like, no, I have this expectation of you. You'll move towards my expectations. But I get why there is stress in that relationship. Like, but it's the same conversation. To your point, it's the same conversation we have with adults. Just try to make it age appropriate and try to stretch it over a longer timeline. You got a lifetime to do this.
Okay.
Let me say this last point. To teach is to learn twice.
That's very, very profound.
When you're coaching, when you're sharing it, there are times, the only way I could say this so clearly is because I reflect on my own, just like, oh yeah, let me take my own medicine. Okay.
Yeah. Practice what I preach.
Yeah, that's an ongoing one, right? Like practicing what you preach, going back with that beginner's mind to be curious and learn again. That's so core. Wow.
Can I speak to one thing that I'm gonna write down because I loved how it came up. Remember how I spoke with trust is based on 3 pillars of speaking truth, it makes sense to you, and you're acting in your well-being. Confidence is confidere, with the trust. If you're trying to instill confidence in your kid, You want them to reflect to themselves to say, I'm telling myself the truth. This makes sense to me as how I see it. Now, what action am I going to take in my own well-being? Really, what you're doing is you're walking along with them in that conversation for them to reflect on their own inner world. And just as much as you're building confidence or trust on the outside, you're building internal trust in them.
Again, my takeaway here was that's work I do with my clients right now, because something that happens, especially as life knocks you down, is you lose your own trust in your intuition, in your instincts, in your decision making, in your judgment. You start to question yourself because maybe you chose to go left and it didn't pan out the way you wanted it to. All of a sudden, you're constantly pulling from everywhere to get validation or confirmation that you're on the right path. And a lot of that is like, no, like, how do you come back to this sense of, no, I can, there's some parts of this, a lot of this that I can do for myself. And how do I build that again? That trust in myself. So interesting. Tell me.
Say, tell me. Man. So we talked about confidence, inner trust. Yeah. Trusting yourself. Another way you build trust in yourself, it's, remember how I said you will make mistakes, you will cause ruptures, you will break. I oftentimes end podcasts with this when they say, if there's one thing you want to share, I'm gonna give it to you. I don't know when we're ending, but I'm gonna give it to you now. You're all good.
I was just about to ask you that question, so hit us.
So breaking is a feature of human development, not a flaw, because we are stress progressive, because we're stepping into growth. When we break, what we do is we make repairs and reconnections. That's it. And it's based on our identity. Again, it's 3 steps. This is not the person who I want to be. I made a fault. I made a breach. I did something that was not in my well-being or in your well-being. This is not the person I want to be. I restored it. Might be an apology, or it might be a payment back to something. Balloons again.
Yes.
But I restored it. And then 3, I'm making a promise to do this going forward. That's how we make repairs. Now watch this. The word resilience comes from saltar, to jump back or to bounce back. The way we gain confidence is by bouncing back. We trust our bounce back. We trust our resilience by making repairs and reconnections on the outside as a parent, teaching them that it's okay to do that on the inside.
That was so powerful.
That's the best way to round this up. That was that was the best cap I've ever seen. Marcus, because you can see from IJ's face, speechless is the word. There was too much wisdom dropped. I can't even. Big thank you from the bottom of our hearts. You really have filled our cups up, and thank you. We thank the universe for bringing you our way, because we don't have teenagers yet, but I can't help feeling that this is a conversation that I'm going to say thank you so much for in 10 years' time. So, and I hope when we release it to our guests, I'm sure loads of people are going to be hitting you up to like,
goodness.
Yeah.
On that point, where can people find you? How can they reach out to you?
MarcusHiggs.com. That's where I'm writing a book now called The Show Up Framework, Nurturing Your Preteen's Potential, just to put all these ideas. That's what I'm going through these podcasts because I'm starting in the game about 3 months in.
Excellent.
A little bit more than that, but I'm
oh my goodness.
Let's be honest, 4 months at the beginning of this year. Yeah.
Okay.
That's going to be such a gift. That's going to be like a handbook, like something that people will have in their back pockets, in their bags. Because they're going to go back to it over and over again. Such an insightful and powerful way.
I think we're definitely going to have you on when the book comes out. But yeah, we're going to put it all in the show notes, your website, and book coming out.
So I'm on LinkedIn. That's where I post regularly. So feel free to connect with me out there. You could say you saw me on the podcast. And I'm putting out this Show Up framework as a beta with my audience. and then you'll see me in time. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. That's so, I mean, it's hard for me to be speechless, really. I mean, there's just, because I'm so wordy and talkative, but there's just so much that you shared, and the depth that you went into, but also the simplicity of how you explained it was just incredible. I am reassured by realizing that even at the tender age of 10, there's so much that they have in terms of their ability to have these kinds of conversations, to think through these things, and to teach us, which is really something that I think that's my biggest takeaway from this conversation is I can learn from them. And so I am just really grateful to you. You've really given us and our whole community an amazing gift. And we would love to continue to be part of your journey as you build out this framework. Thank you so much again.
Yeah.
Thank you for hosting in the platform. It would have been just me and my thoughts in my head, but thank you for vibing with you. It's been a pleasure. Yeah.
All right.